There's loads of great stuff in this episode, but listen, before we get going, I would love it if you could subscribe, but as well as that, just hit the notification bell as well, because as soon as there's a new episode or something fresh from all of us, you will get it first. But for now, grab a pen and paper, because I think you might need to make some notes on this episode. It's full of brilliant takeaways. Enjoy. Here we go.
Welcome to High Performance. Billy Monger, how are you?
Thanks for having me.
First things first, right? We've met quite a few times. Every time I see you, big smile on your face, super positive, talking about all the good stuff. Like, is this real? Are you this positive all the time? Level with us.
Yeah, I'm fairly positive. I went to the casino last night with a mate and won some money, so that's probably why I'm smiling a bit more today.
Love that. There must have been, though, and still, you may still have them, like periods where you just look down at where your legs used to be. For people that don't know the story, you had a huge crash a couple of years ago and you lost both of your legs in that incident. You must still, do you still reflect on that and think, what a shame? Or have you managed to put your mindset into such a place that it's all about the future?
Obviously, there's moments where like something will frustrate me and I'll sort of look down and be like, that's maybe the reason why I can't do something in the same way I used to do it. And it's just more than often it's the small things that like get on your nerves, like because of the fact I'm an athlete and I compete in motorsport. I think a lot of us think of ourselves in sort of like kind of superheroes in some sense, like any athlete, like we're living our dream, like it's almost like a sort of virtual reality in some aspect. It's not like you're not doing a real 9 to 5 job. So then when little things like that you can't do, or you have to think about in a different way to do, it can get on your nerves a bit.
See, I would imagine if I was you, it'd be the opposite. Like when you've been through such a big moment, I wouldn't let the little things piss me off, because I would just be like, I know how fragile life is. Yeah. I'm not going to let that annoy me. Well,
there is that. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, in general, like you say, I'm quite a happy, chilled out person. I don't normally let things get to me, but it's obviously everyone's going to have those those brief cracks.
Like when, Billy? Sorry to interrupt, but when?
So if something as simple as like, I'll be, I don't know, trying to get to a meeting or something, and I'll be getting out of a car, and because my ankles don't have any flexibility in my legs now, I'm trying to get out the car, and it's all of a sudden you're getting a bit flustered because you can't get out of the car and stuff like that. Like, it's just really simple things, but not that would play on my mind. It's just like, that's just my reality. That's day-to-day life for me, that some things are harder. My life in general is harder day-to-day in terms of the small things, rather than actually me as an athlete and a racing driver. When I'm out in the car, I'm doing what I enjoy. And it's a lot. So if from the outside, you wouldn't be able to tell I'm doing it in a different way and from what situation I'm in.
So when you're behind the wheel of a car, is that when you feel most like the old Billy?
Not necessarily most like the old Billy. I mean, I've definitely adapted and changed as a person because of my accident, but there's definitely, I think in general, my character is the same as it was before. It's probably where I feel most comfortable within myself, probably, just because I've done it since I was 7 years old. I spent more years behind the wheel of a go-kart or a racing car than I have not. So it makes up a huge proportion of my personality and who I am as a person. So when I'm out there doing it, I don't have to answer questions about obviously having the accident and stuff like that, because a lot of people like to ask questions obviously about my accident and how I've changed and stuff like that, but in general in my head I'm still the majority, I'm the same person as I was. So I find that frustrating sometimes, so it's always nice to go out there and not have to answer to anyone and just go and do what I enjoy.
Well, did you, and without wanting to dwell on the accident, because
Yeah.
I can appreciate that must be frustrating, like, do you ever have moments of not fair thinking, that where you do, like, you were clearly set on a particular path that you had to take a detour around it?
I think that's life. I think what happened to me is how life works. You have obstacles that are thrown in your way. All different types of things can happen to people day to day. Obviously mine is recognised because it was quite a big accident and a lot of people know about it and stuff like that. But in terms of your mindset and how you get over something like that, it can play on your mind as much as the small things do in terms of getting annoyed at something and getting over it and moving on. I don't really see my accident too different to that. So I don't really play on the whole it's not fair, why did it happen to me card.
But how did you learn that? Because that's a learned skill to be able to put things in perspective as well as that.
Yeah, I think if it's just probably part of my personality. I think my mum and dad and my family, I come from a very hard-working family with my mum and dad never had things given to them the easy way. They all had to work to get where they are. And I think as a kid, I saw that quite a lot. My mum is a makeup artist and she works really long hours, up at 5 a.m, back at 9 o'clock at night. She was never really... there was probably years in my childhood where I wouldn't see that much of her because I'd go to school in the morning, come back. My dad's sister, my auntie, would be at home looking after us, picking us up from school. But it wasn't like I didn't know why she was there and what she was doing. And if anything, it made me the person I am because it allowed me to go and race and do all these amazing things that I enjoyed so much.
Do you think that when you were a young racing driver, and it is super competitive, coming through the ranks of go-karting, trying to get into single-seater racing, which is the most competitive of all the racing, I wonder whether that work ethic that you picked up from your parents is something that was with you throughout that period, because you don't get to where you've got to by chance.
No, I think so. I completely agree. I think my parents, I think it goes for most people in saying that people's parents have a massive impact on what their mindset is and how they're able to achieve certain things. So I don't doubt for a second that my mum and dad's work ethic didn't help me at all in getting to where I was. Of course it has. I mean, it's meant that the small little details that some people might find boring and a challenge, for me, I think in some ways has allowed me to approach that in a different way. I think your family and the people you surround yourself in, it's not for your family you surround yourself with every day. It's not a question of a mate you might see once in a while who's got a great mindset and you try and pick a few things up off of them. It's just natural with your family that you kind of become the person and have the same character as the people you constantly surround yourselves with.
And how did they handle this change in direction? So the accidents happened.
If I'm honest, they took it worse than I did, especially my mum and my dad. I think obviously because they were not... My dad was responsible for getting me into racing because he raced when he was younger. I used to go and watch him, and obviously he got me a go-kart. I think he bought me a go-kart when I was 2 years old, and you can't drive go-karts till you're 7, so he was very keen on getting me out in one, even though I was nowhere near ready for it. It was something that he had in his mind that he wanted me to have a go at, obviously because he really enjoyed it himself. So I think in some ways when I had my accident and stuff like that, my dad probably felt guilty because, if I hadn't not made him, but it got him into racing, then this wouldn't have happened. My mum obviously works all those long hours to be able to pay for me to go racing, so she played a role in the fact that I'd be out on track, especially the level I was at in F4 when I had my accident. That was sort of with the amount of money we have as a family and how expensive motorsport is, that was kind of really F4, maybe British F3 at a push would have been what we could have afforded with my family putting some money in and with the sponsors I had at the minute at that time as well. So it almost felt like we were coming to the end of sort of where we could get to as a family without something happening or getting some more sponsorship from the outside world. And then obviously this accident happens and changes everything. So there was definitely, and I think they took the guilt upon themselves, which they shouldn't have, because it's...
Sure.
I think...
But how did that change the dynamic of your family then, Billy? So obviously you've lent on them and now sounds like they were leaning on you.
Yeah, they definitely were. And it came at a really weird time as well, my accident, because I was 17, to have my 18th birthday in hospital, and when I had my accident, it's kind of that age where you're looking to become more independent. Like, you kind of feel like you want to start doing things more for yourself. You don't want to have to rely on your mum and dad anymore. I didn't want my mum and dad to have to keep paying for me to go racing. It was getting to that stage where I wanted it to be raised through sponsorship. I wanted to become a professional and sort of leave the nest in that sense and kind of figure out exactly who I am as a person. So in that sense, it was really difficult to deal with in terms of the dynamic of the family, because my mum and dad obviously had looked after me and helped me all the way through the ranks, and they wanted to continue to do the same for me. Well, there was sort of a bit of a rebellious part of me that was like, mum would try and push me up the path in the wheelchair, and I'd be like, no, I can do it. It was like I wanted to take on responsibility for my life and going forward, but obviously having an accident like that means that some of your independence is taken away.
Yeah.
You're never going to be grateful, right, for having an accident where you lose your legs. But I wonder whether you are grateful for the fact that, apart from the injuries, the accident brought you profile. The accident linked you up with Lewis Hamilton. You ended up at Formula One races with him as a mentor for you. You've ended up on the television working as a pundit for Channel 4, interviewing the likes of Toto Wolff, who I know went through a big trauma as a young guy himself and believes that high-achieving individuals often have a moment in their youth that they either become so resilient from it or it breaks them. And it looks to me like you've become really resilient from yours. So in a kind of strange way, you talk about the accident happened at a time when you were outgrowing the system you were in at that time, which was being funded by your parents. And it's actually the accident that has moved you into a whole new space that you might never have got to without this terrible crash.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's obviously at the time of the accident, that's not what you think of. I didn't necessarily see it as the end of my world sort of thing, because like you say, there was some part of me that wanted to move on from where I was. But now looking back at it, now I have perspective on what my accident, the opportunities that have come from my accident. There's definitely a lot of silver linings to the story and how I had my accident and what I've been able to achieve since then. And the parts of my accident that is I think the most impact in terms of having it on me. Physically, obviously, the impact is obvious, but mentally and how much stronger I am, I think mentally now is where I see the real benefits from the accident itself.
Explain that a bit more.
So just like in terms of my mindset, like I say, the small things get on my nerves sometimes, but I think sometimes people like to get caught up in things that don't really matter. And as much as I still get annoyed as much as the person next to me, I think I'm able to deal with it a lot quicker. I think there's always that part in my sort of thinking in the back of my mind that allows me to sort of just say, well, why are you even bothering worry about that? Well, before it'd be like, I don't know, you'd spend 5-10 minutes like getting upset if something's happened. But now it's like it happens, have a little bit of frustration, and you're like, what are you doing? And then you kind of just forget about it and keep moving forwards. I say my mindset in terms of looking forward to the next thing and the next day, and I'm excited now every day I wake up for the next day and the next thing to be able to do. I don't take anything for granted anymore. And I think that's probably massively down to my accident and the mindset change.
See, because you've touched on this idea of resilience that you must have had before the accident, and you've required it post-accident. And one of the things that often intrigues me about resilience is they talk about a concept called pre-mortems, where if you anticipate problems, you can deal with them a lot better when you face them. But you've had to learn this post-mortem, post an accident like that. So did you get any help in making that transition?
So hard to say. I think, like you say, you can never plan for anything like this, but what happened to me. To be honest, like you say, I think there was really my mindset, like I say, has changed. So in terms of how I deal with problems and stuff like that, I don't think too far ahead, really. I like to just think day by day and just think of the next opportunity. I never really like to everyone always asks me, so your goal is to get to F1 in the next, how many years is it going to take you to get there? And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to achieve something tomorrow, let alone how I'm going to achieve something in 5 years.
Sure.
So why would you spend your energy and your mindset and put all your time into thinking about where you're going to be in 5 years rather than where you're going to be tomorrow or the next week? I like to keep things short term and keep things simple. I think sometimes life gets so on top of people that they start to overcomplicate it.
Which is a remarkable level of perspective that you have, not only at such a young age, but in terms of when you're in the middle of this. And I can imagine that you've been given a lot of support in terms of physical rehab to be able to learn to walk again and use the limbs. But how much help did you get psychologically to make that transition?
See, I'm a typical stubborn bloke, racing driver, had my accident. I think the most important part for me psychologically after my accident was watching the incident multiple times when I was in hospital. Obviously, it was broadcast live on ITV4, so instantly things start popping up on YouTube, stuff like that. I was in a coma until it happened on a Sunday afternoon, and I don't really remember anything until sort of the Wednesday, Thursday of the next week. From obviously being on the morphine and stuff like that, you don't really remember a lot. And watching the accident and kind of reliving that moment that happened so quickly to me that I wasn't able to comprehend it, just allowing myself time to realise, okay, there was nothing I could have really done there. What happened. It allowed me to sort of digest it all and move forward. Well, my mum and my dad didn't watch it. The thought of watching the accident would like make my mum and dad terrified. And I think it's just about, I guess, kind of facing up to your fear in that sense. I didn't want my accident to become a fear and not addressing it and treating it as this horrible thing that had happened to me and leaving it there rather than just looking at it for what it was, which was an accident.
So you've not had any counselling? You've no professional help mentally?
So this is where I was going to lead on to it. So obviously I was a stubborn racing driver. My mum was always upset about the accident and stuff. We'd go to prosthetic meetings and they'd with my physios and stuff, and they'd say, this is a lifelong thing, you were going to see a lot of you, it's not as simple as get your legs and you're off and you don't have to see anyone again, your legs will change shape, you'll have to be back here. And I think that was quite daunting for my mum. Obviously she's a protective parent, she wants the best for her kid, and I think she was kind of probably at some point of her mind thinking that it was going to be Bill gets his new legs, he starts walking again, and that's it, game over, he's back to how he was before, which obviously isn't the case. That probably took her longer to digest than it did me. But I probably went about probably more than that, actually, we were at 6 to 8 months before I spoke to anyone about it. It was offered to me through the NHS and stuff like that. I'd always say, oh no, my mum, speak to my mum. My mum's a bit fragile at the minute. She doesn't really know how to deal with it. So she spoke to people about it quite early on, but because I'd seen the accident and because I was okay with it, it was like, no, I don't need to see it. I'm fine. I'm ready to move on. It wasn't until sort of like I say, 6 to 8 months later, you start living life properly and things that are completely surreal when you're learning to walk in start becoming more normal, and then you find these frustrations. So I have had counselling since then, and it has benefited me definitely, but yeah, it didn't come as something I naturally wanted to do at first.
So if there was anyone listening to this podcast that is facing their own frustrations, their own setbacks, what advice would you say, having lived probably one of the most extreme setbacks it's possible to think of? What lesson would you share with them?
I think we all think we're super strong individuals mentally, and we all think that we're capable of taking on the world by ourselves in some aspects. But I think that it's not necessarily the only way to do it. And I think that in actual fact, particularly for me, my strength and my story came from the strength of others around me. And it wasn't until I allowed that sort of same principle to be put into me in terms of speaking to other people and that side of things that I really felt that I got over my accident. Obviously in my head I was super strong, I'd seen it didn't bother me, that was me done, like ready to take on the world again by myself. But I think if anything it's made me stronger from talking to other people about my accident. And for me it was actually about talking to people that I didn't know. So obviously the psychologists and stuff like that I've spoken to, most of them didn't know my story, anything about me. They just were dealing with me as an individual as I was now, which was good for me because all the people around me knew me as Billy before, and they could see the changes that had happened in my mindset and stuff afterwards. So it was hard for them to probably communicate with me properly because they didn't know how to approach it. Well, if you speak to someone completely new, they take you as they see you in front of you.
Yeah. And what do you remember the professionals saying to you that you thought, bloody hell, that's good advice. I hadn't even considered that. That's really helped me.
There was never one thing in doing this sort of having the psychologist and stuff like that, wasn't really one thing that kind of was like the magic light bulb moment where I went, okay, yeah, now I'm okay.
Because people often expect that from psychology, don't they? They're anxious, they're depressed, they're not happy, they want to go see someone and walk out like a new person.
Bullet,
Really didn't work like that for me. It was more about just talking to someone who had no preconceptions of who I was before, if I've changed, if at all, from my accident, and more just talking to someone and sharing that. It's so hard as an individual to kind of expose your weaknesses to people. Everyone wants to portray themselves, especially in our society now. I mean, I know I'm guilty for it in some aspects. So, you know, the whole Instagram thing, everyone wants to put up their best pictures of themselves, and they don't want to make themselves look inferior in any sort of way. And it was quite nice to go to someone and not have to worry about putting those walls up and just allow yourself to be exposed. And I think that was kind of how it worked for me, and how I was able to then realise that it's okay to be like that. It's not, you don't have to, everything doesn't have to be perfect every day of every minute for you to be okay. Like, people have down moments, it's normal.
So how has that impacted on you professionally now? So it sounds like you were very driven and very clear focused before your accident, and now you talk about learning this vulnerability and the ability to open up and rely on others. How has that impacted you professionally?
So obviously, as a sportsman, as an athlete, I think everyone is exactly the same for athletes as it is for normal people, in the sense that they want their competitors to see them as this ultimate, you are not going to beat me, I have no weaknesses. And while you think you have no weaknesses as an athlete, is probably where you're at your weakest, because then you can't you can't open your mind and see where you actually are weak and where you can be better. So I think for me, I'm now able to deal with situations where I've not done a good job, rather than blaming it on other situations and other factors. I'm able to quite look at it, I think, in quite a sort of open manner, and actually be able to sort of assess what I'm doing right and wrong better.
Okay. The first time you got behind the wheel of a car again after the crash, I think a lot of people externally will look at it and go, ooh, I bet that was scary, getting behind the wheel of a car. Talking to you now, Val, now, I imagine your mindset was one of, hope I'm just as quick as I was before.
Not the first time. I was actually really nervous first time. Yeah.
What about?
It was just it was all surreal. It happened, I got back in a car 11 weeks after my accident. So I still had like 40 pins in my leg where
this
my
comes
scars
back to you
were.
wanting to show no weakness in the early days, though, doesn't
that's
it? That's what this is about.
Very
this
much.
is like, I'm fine. I'm a racing driver. I'll just go back
The
to work.
opportunity came up. Do you want to get your license back? We can get you out in a car 11 weeks after. For me,
Who offered you that?
so it was the guys with Team Brit, they're called. So they help a lot. They do a lot. They've had a lot of experience with looking after. They do a lot of stuff with the army guys, veterans that have lost limbs and stuff. And so they had all these hand controls already designed for people in the same situation as me. And obviously, I'm a racing driver. It's a racing car. It was like, yeah, why not? Straight away.
Was this seen as part of your rehab though, Billy? Was it?
No, it was just an opportunity for me in my head to get back behind the wheel of a racing car, see what it felt like, get my license back, which was something that I wanted to do straight away because I wanted to get back racing. So it was quite a logical thing. But yeah, like you say, it was 11 weeks after my accident. In hindsight, I don't know whether I was fully prepared for it, but I managed to go out there and do the job, enjoyed it, or started to enjoy it. I was nervous at first. But yeah, it was definitely, my mindset at the time was definitely of that, how I was before, in terms of I have no weakness, I'll go back out, I'll get behind the wheel, everything will be as it was before. It all sounds weird now, reliving it with how I see my mindset changed now after having 2-3 years living like this. It all seems a little bit, I don't know if I'd necessarily do it the same, but that's how it happened.
But wasn't it important, because there would have been a doubt in your head, can I still race? Can I still drive? Will I still get the thrill? Have I even got the balls to get behind the wheel of a car again? The great thing about doing that 11 weeks after is all those questions are gone then. You can actually focus on other stuff, can't you?
Yeah, that's it. I knew that it was possible. I went out there, I'd done it, I got my license back. It was like that sort of spark to realise that this wasn't the end of me as a racing driver. And like I say, at first I was really nervous, because more on the fact that I don't think it was a nervous in terms of being scared of what was actually about to happen. It was more nervous as in, like you say, will I be as good as I was before? Because it was all different. I was nervous that I was going to not be able to use the hand controls properly and not be able to compete at the same performance as I was before. But luckily for me, I got out there, I got comfortable with it really quickly and just started to build on it.
Do you know what I love about this story is it's a reminder for anyone listening that something happens in your life and you think, right, that means X. But actually, like in Billy's case, it might mean Y. It might mean something completely different. And it's all about reacting to it in your own way, but also changing your perception. You know, Billy reacted in a certain way after 11 weeks, and here we are 2 years later, and he doesn't think he'd do the same thing. It is a permanent sort of journey, isn't it? And you just don't know the destination.
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? That it's about you've been clear-sighted, but you've had to take detours along the way and having the willingness to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's this, you don't, like you say, it's not necessarily good to just have one game plan when it comes to your mindset and have that one, okay, I'm going to portray myself as being super strong in every area. And a lot of really, really top athletes in some ways that they have to have some of that mindset. You can't lose that all and start to thinking that you have to change everything that you do. You have to kind of, it's more about being open to the things you are good at and keeping them the same and learning how to adapt the things you're not.
So how would you describe yourself now then, Billy? So before the accident, I'm going to second guess it would be you're a driver. Mm-hmm. How would you describe, how's your identity shifted now?
I'm still a racing driver, and that's still what my focus is in terms of, that's what I love to do the most. And with how my accidents changed me as a person and knowing how short life can be, like I could not be here now and not be able to live these amazing things I'm doing now. So because I love racing the most out of anything, that's what I spend all my energy and focus on.
Sure, but do you not, but beforehand it's quite a selfish pursuit in many ways. It's for you and your family and the people around you, whereas do you feel any responsibility now that you're a role model to young people or that you're an inspiration to others? Does that carry any weight for you?
Yeah, that was something I really struggled to deal with when I had my accident. That whole, all of a sudden, people know who I am, people are following my story, people were saying, we really hope you get to F1 and stuff like that. Like, I was 17 years old, and I was going through a traumatic experience, and all of a sudden I'm becoming people's role models. People messaging me saying, oh, my kid looks up to you, you really inspire me, and stuff like that. It's just like so hard to get your head around. I don't think anyone ever, even like top athletes that go on to achieve amazing things, I think that's something that, like you say, it's in the selfish nature of being an athlete that you don't think about anyone else apart from winning and being an athlete. I don't think anyone ever really grows up to be a out-and-out role model for other people, because why would they? Most people have to focus on themselves first before they can learn to give back to others and that kind of thing. So in some ways, I'm still conflicted with that, being that role model. But I'm more just try to be myself with it now. I don't try and be anything I'm not. So like I say, I am a racing driver. That's who I am really. So in terms of my character and who I am, I don't pretend to be anything I'm not. Right. I'd say I'm quite an authentic person. That's kind of it really.
Yeah. If I asked you to give yourself a mark out of 10 for how happy you were before your crash, when you were a single-minded young guy just wanting to race, what would you have given yourself?
I'd probably give myself the same mark as I give myself now.
Really?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Because it wasn't that I knew all this stuff and I was ignoring it. I hadn't experienced real trauma in my life. I hadn't gone through all the experiences I've gone through. I think people learn in life through experience. And I think as much as I'd like to say that it'd be easy for me to say, oh yeah, I'm happier now because I've learned all these things and I'm a better person or whatever, I thought I was a good person before. I was, in terms of who I was as a character. But I'm able to look at it a different way now after having an accident. But I'd still say I was as happy before as I am now.
I think you're absolutely fascinating individual, and you are inspirational. I know that doesn't sit easy with you. I can tell the way that you shake your head when I say that. But to be the age you are, to suffer a life-changing accident, to return back to the sport you were competing in before, to compete to a similar level. I know you were on the podium at your very first race back. To do all that, to do it all with a smile on your face, and to kind of like sit here and make out that it's not really a big deal. I'm just kind of still me. I give myself the same mark as before. I feel like the same guy. Like, the fact that you don't feel special or any different is actually a mark of how different and how special I think actually you are.
Very much.
You don't have to say anything.
Yeah,
you don't have to say anything. But that's just my emotion. It's been an absolute pleasure to sit and talk to you. I mean, I bet you found this interesting as someone that studies psychology and elite level performance.
I think it's intriguing, and I think Jake's hit the nail on the head there, Billy. I think the fact that you're so level around it, that you've not allowed yourself to get caught up in the highs and lows, is a real testimony. And whilst it seems ordinary to you, there is something really, truly extraordinary about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being on High Performance.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Interesting episode, hey? And of course, there's so much more from the High Performance podcast as well. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give us a thumbs up, leave a review, but somehow get involved with the High Performance podcast and become part of our growing community. Thanks for being part of the adventure.